Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. So glad I was able to reel you back in for another one. So, enjoy tonight's creepy catch of the day. I will never go fishing again.
I read a lot of scary stories, and I'm a huge fan of creepypastas, and most of my friends are too. Of course, they keep asking me, what's the scariest thing that's ever happened to me? And I've always told them that I've never had a paranormal experience. That is a lie. It has always been a lie, ever since I was 17 anyways. I've never told anyone this story because, in truth, who would believe me? Now, I'm sure you guys won't believe me either. It is a pretty outrageous tale, but at least here, I can get this off my chest without fear of reprisal. At best, you'll just regard it as some scary story, and I'll feel all the better just for telling it. But I implore you, please, listen to my words with some sense of consideration for possibility. It could someday save your life. When I was a senior in high school, my good friend at the time, Jay, had his own car. This meant that he was able to drive himself back and forth to school, not having to take the bus, or cheese wagon, as he put it. Since my house was along his route to school each morning, he was able to pick me up. I didn't have my own car then, so I had to settle for riding in his. It wasn't all that bad, though. Our good friend Mark was also en route. He didn't have his own car either, so he couldn't really bust my balls about it. Now, we grew up in a country town, nestled in a woodsy region, broken only by patches of long, sprawling fields and rolling hills. There were many brooks and mountainside creeks that snaked around the bases of those hills in the valleys, leading to and from several hidden forest lakes and ponds in which no road led to. The three of us spent much of the warmer season in those woods, fishing in those lakes and ponds, more so once school had been let out for summer. Besides landing a few nice-sized fish and stumbling across deer in the woods, who were then sent crashing into the brush beyond, we had never experienced anything ominous or dreadful in those woods. Nothing that ever even classified as weird. So, there was no way we could have possibly expected what was going to happen on that day. It was Jay's idea. "Hey guys, you know it's senior skip day, right?" I remember him saying, his tone purposeful. I nodded and agreed. Mark apparently didn't know, but it was obvious as soon as he had brought it up on that morning that we weren't going to school. So, what did we agree upon? You've probably guessed it. We drove back to Mark's house. His mom and dad both worked days, so it was easy for him to swipe a few beers from his old man's basement fridge. He had done so before, and his dad never caught on because it wasn't like he counted them or anything, I suppose. Neither I nor Mark had brought fishing tackle with us for obvious reasons, but Jay told us that he had come prepared, having stowed a fully loaded tackle box and 3 poles in the trunk before leaving his house that morning. So, before the bell at the high school had even rung, the 3 of us were off on our way to find a new fishing hole deep beyond the forests we already knew so well. I imagine we had walked for a few hours. My feet were killing me by the time we had found it, the perfect spot. We had parked Jay's car on the dirt road a few miles away and hiked along a creek about 30 minutes out of town. Packs on our backs and poles in hand, Mark and I kept insisting that we stop at one or two perfectly good places that we had passed along the way, mostly because Jay wouldn't allow us to open any beers until we got fishing. But Jay insisted that we could find a better spot if we just kept looking. Yeah, I was getting irritated, tired, and thirsty, but it beat the hell out of sitting in those boring classes all day. When we finally came to it, I knew that Jay would have to agree that this was it. The perfect place. Every fisherman knows exactly what I'm talking about. That little place you can never seem to find. A beautiful oasis deep in the woods, miles away from everyone, fish leaping out of the water, and not another soul on the planet even knowing it exists. Therefore, it's all yours. This was that place. The sunshine above the forest canopy shone brightly upon the tranquil surface of a vast pond, nearly the size of a small lake. I remember how the light beams leaked through the leaves at the brim of the forest, along the circumference of the pond's edge, how the leaves separated in the morning mist, giving the whole scene an almost enchanted forest ambience. It was so beautiful, I honestly forgot how much I wanted to crack open one of those beers. It had been about another hour of fishing before we had gotten our first bite. As no one we knew had ever been out this way before, we had no idea what would be on the end of Jay's line. Mark and I stopped fishing to take in the epic fish Jay was now engaged in battling. I can't speak for Mark, but I know my eyes went wide as saucers and my heart leaped with anticipation as Jay's flexible pull bent nearly all the way over. Whatever he hooked was big. I mean real big. I watched the tip of it wiggle and bounce as the prey desperately tried to escape. Then, in one heart-dropping moment, the line snapped. "Fuck!" Jay cried out in frustration. Both Mark and I were quite empathetic. Our hopes were nearly as high as Jay's in the landing of that fish. He grumbled for a bit. We discussed the assumed size of the thing for a while more, but it wasn't long before we had gotten back to the fishing, now imbued with a new sense of hope at getting more than just a bite. Because of how long it took for the first bite to occur, about 3 beers worth, I think, we had all assumed that another wouldn't happen right away. But we were wrong. I had just landed my lure in the water and was taking another sip from the bush can in my hand when the line went out with the drag on my pull. I was using a crankbait, a lure that you have to reel in to be used effectively, but this thing had just taken it from hitting the water. I set the hook, spilling a hefty portion of suds on my clothes, and began to reel it in. Once again, after only a handful of cranks, my pole nearly broke in half. It had been bent so far. I remained firm on the grip, keeping the tension taut while I tried to adjust the drag at the same time, not wanting the line to snap. To my dismay and surprise, the pole sprang back to its original position when the snapped line released with a wisp as it cut through the air. Both Jay and Mark once again stopped fishing to watch me, and both let out disappointed awes when the line broke. But, unlike Jay, I wasn't in the least bit upset in that moment. Actually, I was confused. Again, this is fisherman lingo, but I use spider wire line. This shit is strong stuff. It's thin, so you get the concealing diameter that you would with a normal 6-pound test, but its resilient design enables a greater amount of strength. I remember specifically that I was confused because I was using 30-pound test spider wire line. Like, literally, once I casted an expensive lure right into a tree branch. This branch was leaned out way over a swamp-like lake that I had no interest in swimming in, and if you had seen the size of the snakes and turtles in there, neither would you. Anyway, I knew the lure was lost, but attempted tugging at the line anyway. To my surprise, not only did this super strong line get me my lure back, it had broken the tree branch it was attached to and dragged that along with it. Like I said, strong line. For something in those waters to have broken that line was somehow a thought that brought with it an unshakable sense of fear. Nothing in a body of water that size should have been able to do that. Then, I reasoned that northern pike, although rare in ponds, do inhabit the waterways of this region, and if I had hooked one of them, its long, sharp teeth could have simply cut the line. Even as I pretended to shake off this feeling and go back to fishing with my friends, I knew that that assumption didn't make any sense. Pike get big. I've seen some of the biggest pike ever caught, and not one has ever bent a pole over like that. So, to save you listeners some repetition, I'll simply say that this kept happening over and over again. It got to the point where we honestly thought that whatever was in this lake wanted to be caught. That the same giant fish kept biting the lines in an attempt to get caught, only to be met with disappointment each time our flimsy tackle proved insufficient to support a beast of his size. This fisherman's fancy was refuted, however, when both Jay's and Mark's poles dipped hard at the same time before ending in broken lines. We decided that it must be an infestation of giant, hyper-intelligent bass that planned to overthrow us by removing us from our tackle one hook at a time, a jest reinforced once we realized that we were running out of bait. This was a pleasant fisherman's thought, I know, for the real truth was something far worse. This all culminated when Jay snagged something for the last time beneath the murky waters of that lake. I watched Jay and the monster battle for moments that seemed to last forever, with anticipation oppressing the excitement. Neither Jay, nor the fish, nor the line would yield. It seemed as though Jay might succeed, as the tension in his line began to recede. But in a quick flash of a moment, the line was jerked so hard it tore the pole from Jay's hand. Now, Jay was always a bit crazy. That one guy in the group known for being a little rash. Well, he loved that pole, and that crazy son of a bitch dove right in after it, shoes and all. Within moments, Jay sunk beneath the water. The water churned about with movement, and I think Mark and I were holding our breaths along with him. It was right when I began to get worried that Jay rose to the surface in a splash, yelling something, but he was cut off as he was quickly pulled back under the water. Mark and I looked at each other perplexed. Jay surfaced again, screaming only one word before, once again, being pulled sharply beneath the rippling surface. He was known for his pranks on us, so I guess even now it isn't a surprise I didn't move to help him. But if he had drowned or something that day, I wouldn't have forgiven myself. Another moment or two passed, Mark and I debating whether or not this was a really foolish joke, when Jay broke the water's surface at the water's edge. He managed to get halfway from the water, but was yanked backwards, falling onto his stomach, being dragged back in, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't a prank. The way he had been pulled back, something had a hold of him. Mark and I reached down, gripping the arms of our friend. The two of us fought with all our might to free him, but whatever had him had an unyielding grasp on him. Whatever it was must have let go, because in an instant he was free and dragged to safety. Moments later, tackle abandoned on the shore, we were running through the woods to the car. Jay kind of hobbled as he had apparently lost a shoe. Mark and I asked him over and over what had happened, but he wouldn't answer us, at least not until we were in the car and driving away from that place, on our way to inform the local police. A small investigation of the grounds prompted an immediate search and dragging of the lake, and what they found, I will never forget. The police discovered the bodies of 6 corpses over the course of 2 days, tied at the ankles to cinder blocks as weights. Each victim was female between the ages of 16 and 23, and judging by the stages of decomposition, the coroner said they had been dead for approximately 3 to 5 months, depending on the corpse. Of course, each was murdered, and I don't believe they ever caught who did it. I didn't believe Jay that day, which is why I'm sure you don't believe me now. But I swear, I'm speaking the truth when I tell you that Jay's lost shoe and a few fishing lures were stuck into and gripped tight in one of those long dead corpses' rotten hands.
Well, if you take one little fillet from that little tidbit, it's always to be wary of your surroundings, lest you become a part of them. But if you want a more picturesque glimpse of terror, make sure to come back again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.